Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is From AI Sprawl to AI Impact, why picking one workflow and going deep is the only strategy that works. I'm joined by Chris Fitkin, co-founder and partner of Metacto. Chris, welcome.
Michael, thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks. So you have a really interesting background, and I like to get into that just a little bit as we kind of jump into this. I mean, you're master's in software engineering, you're an AWS Certified Solutions Architect. I know you've been a CTO in cybersecurity. You've led due diligence at a couple of private equity firms for a couple of big deals, and now your current, firm you founded with Garrett Fritz. I know you started in mobile app development in a fractional CTO firm, and then at some point you've pivoted and now focus more on operational AI and working with PE-backed companies and mid-market companies. So I wonder, what drove you to the pivot? And because I know that, the company was doing well before that. And then, what do you think about what actually takes to make AI work in production, which is, the topic of the year, I guess, this year?
Yeah, of course it is. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Michael. Again, thank you for having me. Really excited to be on the show and a lot of really good questions there. I'd say that change is something that's been constant through my career. I've been in software engineering for 25 years, building software teams, software companies. And the only thing that's stayed the same is that I've got to learn something new and change what I'm doing almost every year through internet, distributed, server client, web 2.0, blockchain, and AI is the newest one. And it's not even the first time we've had AI as a big popular hype cycle in the industry. And, one thing that hasn't changed through all of that is my job's the same. How do I be a good technology partner? How do I understand technology deeply? And how do I bring that knowledge into the companies I work with and I work for, help them understand technology, what it can do, and then help them execute so that that technology gives them more leverage in whatever they're trying to accomplish in their business or their company at the time. Going back to Metacto, where I am now, right, I absolutely started as fractional CTO. We did a lot of really heavy mobile app development work, which was a really good place to be 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's changed a lot, just like a ton has changed in the last year. One of the most interesting stats around mobile apps is in the last year, App Store submissions to the Apple App Store has doubled, while actual app downloads have decreased. So there's more in there, more competition, more shipping, but people don't actually want to use these apps as much as they used to because everybody is using AI agents, LLMs to solve a lot of their problems. I'm doing it too. I don't use a training app anymore when I run. I've just got a chat history in my ChatGPT app that I keep talking to about my runs and what I should be doing, and it's doing a better job than any app ever did.
Yeah, it's great how this starts to integrate into your life. And, we were talking at the beginning about my process around generating questions for the conversation. And I also am a big fitness nut, and I have this whole regime that was designed by Perplexity for me to go through every day. And so it's great to have a companion to answer some of those questions for you. I know that you guys have done a lot of research around sprawl, AI sprawl particularly. And I think when we were talking before, you cited a McKinsey data point or data study that showed 88% of companies are using AI now in at least one business function. But then, of course, MIT shows that only about 5% see measurable P&L impact. And you've written about a cycle that keeps repeating, right? Good idea, really cool demo, try to get it into production, mixed results, low adoption, shelfware. And I could take the AI out of that and probably talk about all these other changes that we had that fell into that same boat, right? But what's actually going wrong between demo and production? And why does this cycle keep repeating itself, even in organizations that are genuinely committed to AI?
Yeah, and I honestly believe that these companies are genuinely committed and trying to change the way that they're working with AI
Mhm.
because they see other companies doing it and they're being told that everybody's doing it, but it's a muscle that not every company and every team has, right? And those same stats that you referenced are a lot of the industry pool that we've seen for the last year and where we're trying to position ourselves and help other companies. And that is everybody's trying to do a lot with AI right now, and they're getting a lot of experiments done, and they're trying a lot of things in every single department on every single team. And everybody's having a hard time getting over the hurdle of how do I actually get this into production, operationalized? How do I measure it? And how do I tie it back to actual business impact? Those are much harder questions and processes than how do I open up ChatGPT agents, write a prompt for a new agent, and get a custom agent, in 30 seconds. And everybody has those tools, and it makes it look like it's going to be really easy. And so it's easy to get started, get something exciting, show a cool demo with, perfect access and perfect data where you've scripted the inputs, outputs 10 times before you show it to anybody. But when you need to do that 100 times with different data and different customers in production, that's where it starts to break down. And what we're seeing in all these companies is you said AI sprawl. The sprawl is every department's trying to do it separately. It's this wide and shallow approach to everybody's getting access to the tools. Everybody try to solve your own problem, and hopefully we'll pick winners and let them bubble up. And what happens in the industry is nothing bubble ups. Everybody goes through that same low adoption and shelfware lifecycle, because what makes a really cool AI demo is a really hard process to operationalize and bring into production.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like we've talked for years about shadow IT, and now it seems like we've turned to shadow AI, because
Yeah.
everybody wants to use it, but then once they get it in, it's not enterprise, not supported. It's, you know, it, it,
Yeah.
it definitely is a challenge. And you quoted something to me when we were chatting about the conversation from PwC, and I've seen other studies too
Yeah.
that talk about companies that go, pick a workflow, go narrow and deep, are more than twice as likely to have a measurable bottom line impact compared to companies that, scatter AI experiments across the organization or have shadow AI, I guess. And I mean, that's a big number. Can you unpack why going narrow and deep works so much better? And what does it look like in practice when an organization, actually commits to that approach instead of kind of spreading the bets all across the board?
Yeah. And I love that. I love that metric that companies that go narrow and deep are twice as likely to have P&L success with their AI projects. And that's exactly what anybody that asks me for help, what should I do? That's always my answer is focus, 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 go narrow, and then spend a lot of time on it and really understand it and go deep. Right. And the difference when you go deep, you're going to do a lot more planning, you're going to do a lot more work and a lot more measurement after the fact. So when you're planning, you're going to ask the questions, what is this actually trying to solve? You're going to go problem first instead of solution first. You're going to spend more time in cycles on solving the problem. It's not going to be prompt to agent. It's going to be days or weeks of talking about it, meeting, planning, throwing out bad ideas, getting new ideas, testing them, actually testing them with real users and iterating on it, and having an actual plan to measure it in production. What does success look like? Is it adoption? Is it throughput? Is it cost reduction? And you know what those numbers are, and you know what you're going to measure going into it. So when it comes time to say if it's working in production, you actually have the numbers to look at, and you know what to look for. I'll give you, yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll give you an example of what that looks like to go deep. I'm working with a SaaS company, and one of their big problems is enabling their support and their sales team to answer product questions because poor documentation and fast moving product changes. And you see that everywhere, right? That's not a unique problem, but it shows up in salesperson's on phone call. They don't know the answer because customer has an edge case, unique questions. So they put it in Teams chat to the product team. Hey, can my product do this? Does it do that? If we're on, do we support old versions of LDAP sync? Do we support hybrid user directories that are cloud on-site hybrid installations, right? Complex stuff that's more than just, do you support LDAP? Do you support SCIM?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they ask that question, and then it takes hour, 4 hours a day to get an answer from the product team sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think for years, and now working with a lot of clients, I get this conversation going, and they're getting so much pressure from the board or from the executives, like, we have to have AI. But the problem seems to me like it's a solution looking for a problem instead of a problem looking for a solution, right? It's backwards. And if you're just applying this to your existing workflows without looking at them, you're automating broken things. Yeah. But I don't see how that makes your business better, right? I guess it makes your break faster.
That's always the promise of technology. And like going back hundreds of years, the definition of technology is processes and tools that make things better, faster, right? They're a tool to create leverage inside of a process or organization. It's the same thing today. And if you've got a bad process and you apply leverage to it, you get more bad process faster.
Yeah. I mean, at least we've speeded up the failure.
Yeah. Hopefully we're identifying it sooner.
Well, hopefully, that's exactly right. Well, I know that you guys published a framework called 5 Signals for Picking Your First AI Workflow. And the signals are not necessarily that exciting, but important. I mean, email spreadsheets, copy paste relays, contextless approvals, repeat expert answers, report factories. That's a very different kind of starting point than where most of the organizations I talk to, at least, look when they're first thinking about AI. Why are the mundane, I won't use boring, mundane workflows the right place to start? And how do you help leadership team, kind of see the value in something that it's not as shiny, it's not as glitzy as perhaps, some of the things that would be exciting in a generative AI or chat, demo?
Yeah, those are all really good examples of problem thinking, right? Because whenever you've got a process in an organization, that means that the organization or the company's already found there is value in doing this thing over and over again, every single day, every single week, because somebody needs the output, because it needs to go to finance, because customer needs this output. So you throw a human at the problem, and they spend hours every day or every week doing it. And if it wasn't worth doing, most companies over time shed that process. And so looking at where people are spending a lot of time in spreadsheets, emails, back and forth communication, you're uncovering what are the workflows that the company has decided it's worth spending really expensive human capital time on. And that's a really good indicator of what should we be using AI to improve. And that brings us all the way back to, we're adding leverage to a process that we already know is valuable because somebody has to do it every single day.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that is definitely a different way of thinking about it. And in a lot of companies, I mean, for years, we have used humans as the gap closer. I mean, even I used to joke, integration, a lot of times integration when I'd go into a client was some poor person moving data from one thing to another thing on one or more computers. And that's hard to call that automation, but I guess, it worked for a while. When I was doing research for the episode, I was looking at your site and you had something I thought was really interesting. And it says, there's a graphic that says like 5% of the work, demo and production is really 95%. Access control, business rules, quality checks, human review, audit trails, monitoring, versioning, support paths, ownership. I mean, you call that the gap between the prompt and the product. Can you walk us through what 95% actually looks like in a real engagement and where organizations most commonly underestimate the effort?
Yeah, everybody's going to underestimate that effort because all of that work that you talked about, cleaning data access permissions, edge cases, escalation paths, that's all traditional engineering, cloud engineering, infrastructure process work. It's not what anybody's talking about when they're talking about AI, chatbots, LLMs, agents. Everybody's talking about what does the cool demo do? What is the shiny output? What does the chat interface look like? What's the cool newest model from Anthropic or ChatGPT that I can use to do this, right? And looking top down, where I'm looking at the chat and I'm looking at the models and the outputs, that's a really good way of seeing what best case value is going to look like, but it doesn't account for any of the failure modes. Failure modes are a bad decision that gets compounded for 5 days in a row because nobody caught the bad decision from the LLM and it kept going downstream, 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 went to the customer, right? An example is like customer asks a question and my AI chatbot gives it wrong information about pricing or refund policy, or the chatbot's built really quick. And in order to build it quickly, you give it admin access to the entire underlying database. And all of a sudden that's exposed over a chat interface. And any customer can ask questions to a chatbot that has production access to every record in your database, right? There's real problems that show up when you don't plan for access visibility, logging, disaster recovery. And so planning for those means that we're going to eliminate a lot of the failure mode cases in production, which gives us a much bigger chance of successful production rollout.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, one of the things that you talked about, and I for the first couple of years after ChatGPT was released and Google came out with Bard, now Gemini, Claude, Anthropic, all these new LLM based things, we spent a lot of time talking about prompt engineering, and this was a great thing, right? And this was going to be your new career. You could learn how to be a prompt engineer. Well, we've transitioned into the agentic era where a lot of the prompting is different, right? Some of it's built into the application itself, and there's some different ways you set goals and outcomes and all these different things. But the piece that people miss a lot is context, and you've called that context engineering, which I particularly like. I think that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about structuring data and rules, permissions, source of the truth, business logic, into some way that the AI can actually use it reliably. So I like to think of it as context and memory, right? You need the context of the problem, but you also need to remember how we've been doing this for the last 2 weeks. And it's different, right, than the prompting or selecting a model. What do you think this is? What's context engineering in practice, and why is it the step that determines whether an AI system gives consistent, trustworthy answers or falls apart when it gets to the production real work?
Yeah, context engineering, the easiest way to explain the problem is the famous business maxim, garbage in, garbage out. I've been saying garbage in, garbage out to stakeholders, business teams every year for the last 20 years, because you're trying to build, because you're trying to build a system, but you're skipping the step of getting all the data in order that you need in order to be successful, right? A lot of these AI LLM systems say, just point me at all your data and I'll figure it out. But companies take these LLMs, agents, drop them in place and point them at old, bad, unstructured data. And when that's the information that you're feeding into a system, you're going to get bad information out because it's going to give you the absolute best answer that it could on the data that it has. And so as you're building, right, thinking about building the context for your new AI solutions hub, agents, there's 3 really big parts of that. One is your transactional data. Do you get the data from all your software and systems into a data warehouse that is current and fresh and deduped and has all the right relational mapping inside of it? That's one. Second is you've got this giant corpus of document data that your company's generated for years. Proposals, briefs, QBRs, client deliverables, a ton of huge wealth of information that you want your LLM to have access to, so it understands what does work look like inside your organization. And is it all tagged correctly? Is there recency bias? Have you changed the format of your QBRs and reporting in the last quarter? And you need to tell the LLM, hey, anything older than a year is good directionally, but don't use it as a source of truth. And then finally, and this is the newest part, is how are you codifying your company business rules and domain knowledge, which historically has only lived in the heads of your employees, which is, hey, who's our big important legacy customers? What is the interoffice politics? When somebody disagrees, who has the right to approve or escalate this conversation? A lot of that we just assume that a human's going to solve, but if we don't take the time to interview the right people, document that, build a system that can surface those questions and then turn them into learnings, markdown, database artifacts, the system's never going to get smarter and learn that. So you've got to address all three areas of that context and make sure that your new agents and LLMs have access to all those and know how to use it. And then you'll get good answers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really different conversation when you're talking about, you know, a hybrid workforce, a digital worker that does things versus I'm going to ask a question and get an answer, and I can still go check the answer if I need to, if it doesn't seem right. So, I mean, this is a different level of investigation, right? So yeah, that makes sense. You know, when we were talking, setting up the episode and talking a bit about what we're going to talk about, you made a point that I think is important. And, you know, for a while we talked about digital first, and then all of a sudden it was AI first. And your statement I thought was really interesting and relevant to where we are. And that is, we have to convert this to a business first conversation.
Sure.
Your team uses product managers to lead engagements, and you described, you know, product engineers or forward deployed engineers is the cool new topic, or cool new term, I guess. Who are responsible for understanding the business, talking to users, planning a solution, then bringing it, you know, through for feedback. It sounds like, you know, what good software implementation always was supposed to be, but why is the industry? Why do we do this? Why do we keep forgetting, and then having to start this over again? Even though, you know, it is always important when you're talking about implementing these new systems.
Yeah. What's old is new again. And the whole discipline of everybody's discovering that requirements engineering is its own discipline, right? With all these new tools, with Claude Code, with Replit, with Lovable, it's really easy to build first and plan later. And sometimes that's fun when you're experimenting and exploring, but it's not a great plan when you're trying to build something that's going to change the way people actually work inside your business, to build something that is useful and something that's going to get adopted, right? And software engineering has had the discipline of requirements engineering for decades. We have structured product requirements documents, user stories, roadmaps, acceptance criteria. Those all mean something very specific in software engineering, and they were designed to solve this problem. How do we take business problems and business requirements and turn that into structured requirements that we can build a spec to and build software to? And a lot of people are skipping this step right now and learning how important it is when we get to that low adoption shelfware state.
Yeah, we're at this funny point right now where we've had all these pilots and everybody was excited to do the pilots, but then you step this in, you try to scale it up, and it's a very different proposition than perhaps it looked in its little limited pilot, right? Interesting. So I know you target and work with mid-market companies and private equity-backed companies, and I've done a lot of work with the mid-market as well, because I can see a gap there, and I know we talked about this before. You've identified what is, you know, an important gap, in that they can't really afford or choose not to afford McKinsey or Accenture to figure out an AI strategy, but and maybe wouldn't have been a good approach for them anyway, right? I mean, you
expensive.
can't. Well, yeah, that exactly, and you know, but you can't also just kind of distribute license to your favorite tool or agentic tool and expect to get results. Well, expect good results anyway, and you know, you've noted that, and we mentioned forward deployed engineers. I know Anthropic has started to push this model that bills out at, you know, a big number, 800 a year.
800,000 a year for an Anthropic FDE if you want one.
Yeah, I wonder what percentage they make of that. Oh, never mind. and obviously $1 million in token. And I mean, what does this look like in the mid market? What do they actually need, and how do you fill that gap?
Yeah, and so I love working with mid-market companies because they've got real big problems worth solving. They've got pressure to move and move fast and show profit, but they might not have a big internal team of IT technology, engineering, LLM, AI PhD experts. And so they're desperate for what is the answer, because all the industry news comes from the big companies and the big players, and it looks like everybody's doing a lot and doing it really quickly. I saw Mars Inc. signed a deal with Google Gemini, and they're paying $600,000 a month in licenses just to be able to use the platform. Right, that's a wild number. I work with one of my mid-market companies who was approached by Anthropic, and Anthropic says, "Hey, we'd love to work with you. Here's some terms." Terms were $1.2 million a year in token minimums for their package, right? And that's a big number for these companies. For some of these companies, that's 5% of their annual revenue. And I don't know any mid-market company that can take a 5% overnight hit to their profit margin. So they've got to come up with what are more cost-effective solutions to start now, generate value, like actually realize profit margin or revenue, and then use that to compound investment over time. And so that's why we say work with people that know how to get something into production, so you're not spending a lot of cycles on experiments and that you can move faster. But start small where you know you're going to get a win. Pick one workflow process, build a single agentic workflow where you can measure $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, $1 million lift impact inside your organization, then use that to fund the next 2, 3, 4 projects where you implement AI in the next quarter.
Yeah, I mean that's make each one of these projects pay for itself over a shorter period of time, so that you can afford to continue on, and in fact you get business benefit out of it as well, right? Yeah, you guys have developed something called AI Engineering Maturity Index, which is like an assessment, a 30-day assessment that measures organizations across 8 phases, 6 dimensions: workflow fit, to governance, to measurement, gaps, maps the gaps to EBITDA, margin, enterprise value. I mean, all these things are financially oriented, and definitely a way to put this in the context of getting value out of it, right? But how does grounding the assessment in financial metrics change the conversation with those executives or with their boards? And what patterns do you see, where organizations score the lowest?
Yeah, this is going to map back to everything we've talked about today, right? Where we're looking at, do you have good data and is it in the right place? Do you know what metrics you're trying to improve? Do you have baseline measurements for what those metrics are today for throughput, adoption, cost inside your organization? Do you have the right people internally to take on these projects? Do they have the bandwidth to do that? Do they have the knowledge to do that? Do they have the interest in being able to do it? And answering a lot of those questions first before you start solving problems. One, and I keep saying this, is going to increase your likelihood of success. But 2, when you're going to investors boards or your CEO and you're trying to say, or your CFO, and you're saying, I need budget for this project, right? This is a skill everybody should have, is I can say that I anticipate this project's going to have Y incremental lift on revenue, cost, margin, speed, quality, or throughput inside my organization. And it makes it a business decision that, 1, is going to be a lot easier to get a yes on. And 2, in 90 days after you've rolled this out, it's going to be easy to point back and say, was this actually successful? Not, did this AI create a cool output, but did it have the actual business impact that I wanted it to have?
Yeah, it's interesting because I know, when you talk about agentic systems, you shift a little bit and you really do, just like you would talk with a human worker, you're talking about goals, right? Setting the right goals, having the right metrics. And I've seen examples where the metrics, again, not that different than a human employee, set the wrong metrics and the outputs are not going to be, the outcomes are not going to be what you expected, right? I mean, if I tell my customer service agent, keep all my customers happy, well, that might work, but it also might get you into financial trouble
Yeah.
or other regulatory trouble or
Yeah,
whatever,
don't
right?
worry. We've overserved every customer and we've retained everybody at a 10% loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even when we first started talking about CRM, we used to talk about that a lot. Like companies would be like, yes, we're going to use this. We're going to give the customer the absolute most perfect experience they could ever have. And the truth is, the customer really just wanted you to do the thing they paid you for in the way they paid you for it. And it's, expectations, right? And just setting the right metrics can really modify, change the way you think about your projects and what success looks like, right?
Yeah, and it's going to give you that grounding point and that heuristic for every decision you or anybody on the
Mhm.
project makes along the way when you're building and investing in features, capabilities,
Yeah.
tooling. You're going to be able to make those trade-offs of, is this decision serving the underlying goal of X business metric, right?
Yeah.
Adding new revenue, reducing cost, and it's going to be clear what you're trying to accomplish at every step.
Yeah, it probably makes the conversation with your board a little easier too when you're when you have that
Yeah,
context.
yeah. The board loves to talk about new revenue and cost savings, and so as much
Mm.
as I get to do that, I like to bring the conversation to that altitude.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. For business leaders that are listening right now, who recognize their organization and what we've talked about, which I suspect there's quite a few. They have AI experiments scattered across, multiple departments and 20 different initiatives. The demos look great, but they haven't gotten anything production or very limited production. And speaking of that board, now they're asking, when's AI going to show us some payback? What's the first practical step that they should take this week? And just as importantly, what should they resist doing?
Yeah, that's the one word I would tell everybody to think about is focus, right? The people that are going to be successful and have impact with AI in their organization are the people that can focus better. Focus on projects, meaning don't try to do 20 things at once. Pick one, two things that you have a high confidence are going to be impactful and that you have the right team to execute
Mhm.
against, right? You have the baseline business metrics to measure against historically.
Mhm.
If you've got 20 ideas, that's not a bad thing. You've probably even experimented with them. Find some way to prioritize them, stack rank them by confidence and impact, create a scatter chart against a confidence or complexity matrix, whatever makes sense inside your organization, but
Mhm.
find a way to pick the winners where you actually want to spend time and impact change, focusing on
Mhm.
bring focus to your project planning. And then second is bring focus to your people, right? You've probably got, being an AI expert isn't a job anybody had in their company a year ago,
No.
right? 12 months ago, 6 months ago, even in December 2025, most people weren't. And so if you've got people assigned to these transformational projects, make sure that they're not still trying to do their 40-hour a week day job that they came from. Give them the time and the space to change work and solve hard problems. And make sure you've got the right knowledge and information and expertise on your teams. Some companies are really lucky and have this internally. They have
Mhm.
advocates that are learning and doing and experimenting and reading all the news and running the latest Claude or Chat GPT model locally and testing all the new build processes and looking at Google's agent cloud infrastructure announcements. If you don't have that, find somebody. There are a lot of resources out there, and I'm sure somebody in your network that you can talk to that's happy to talk to you about it and give you advice.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting from a mid-market perspective, right? Because you are in a really you have constraints around resources, but more so than an enterprise company for sure. Yet you have to compete in a marketplace that is global and frankly is competitive from an enterprise perspective too, right? So it's kind of you're caught in a spot and you have internal resources, but they aren't experienced because who is these days? It takes a while to develop that, right? So, augmenting rather than just trying to go out. I mean, and if you try to go out and hire a bunch of AI engineers right now, good luck. Because unless you got a really big pile of cash, you're probably not going to find them. But you can bring in help. And then also, I'm just curious, what do you see from an education standpoint? I mean, is that a part of this? Should the companies, mid-market companies, really think about this, augment where you have to, and also train, bring those people forward into this so that that you educate your whole team around what this is going to look like for them in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like I said, companies don't have this expertise, especially not at the mid-market level, at least not up until this year. And so if you can bring someone in, bring them in, but you've got two areas that you need to do education inside your company. You need builders and advocates that can bring new ideas and projects into the organization. And that's one area of training that you need. And the second is adoption. You need to be teaching your employees how to be using AI, how to interface with an agent, when to ask questions, when to go there, how much time to spend learning, how much to trust them, how much to push back against an agent. These are all new business skills that nobody's had before, that some people are doing really well naturally, natively, and some people just haven't thought about it yet. And it's important that everybody in your organization builds these skills over the next year.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think too, from a leadership perspective, that's probably also an area that you really have to spend some time, because as leaders in organizations, how many people have had experience managing a hybrid team that has both human and digital workers? And what is that going to look like? Because if you do think of it that way, right, that's a different level and different set of skills that you need to add to your, toolkit, I guess, to go forward.
Yeah, you've got to be, as a CEO, now you've got to be creative, you've got to be curious, you've got to be flexible, and you also have to be skeptical, right? And sometimes these are skills that were really important in your business before, and sometimes they're new because your industry and your field is going through a lot of disruption. And while you may have led through a lot of historical knowledge that you've built up over decades before, you're entering a year where all that knowledge isn't as helpful as it used to be, and being able to adapt and change is more helpful now.
Yeah. Well, a very, very interesting conversation, Chris, and I really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of really useful nuggets in here that the audience can take away. Could you recommend somebody, a thought leader, an author, podcaster that you think the audience would enjoy and that they should check out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorite podcasts that I've heard in the last week is Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale. He had a guest on there, the IBM CEO, Arvind Krishna, and he did a really good job talking about not where we are today with AI and cloud, but where he thinks we're going to be in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and what commoditization does to the providers and the token costs, and what new price problems companies are going to face and how they can address those with hybrid, on-site, local AI LLM solutions. And it's real interesting. And it's probably what we're going to be talking about a year from now.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love Reid Hoffman's podcast. Lots of really good stuff on there. So thank you. And Chris, thanks for joining today. Really appreciate it.
Michael, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arionresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.